I'm here at CES, and at the top of CES is one of my favorite companies historically in technology, especially in communication, secured communication, is the CTO of Blackberry, Charles Eagan. Welcome to the Playbook.
Well, thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here.
Well, you may be happy, but I'm ecstatic, and I'll tell you why. I do so many interviews with people in technology, and you and I have been in this game a long time, and I think without perspective of where we've come from, that we're shorting ourselves when we're amplifying certain solutions that either may not be real or may never work when it comes to being a business. And the true test of time is a company like BlackBerry that has led the way with certain capabilities and continues to learn and fit in a marketplace to utilize its core capabilities with the ever-changing, fast-paced world of technology, especially communications. For you, you've been in this space a long time. How and what do you see as BlackBerry's core capability, and how has it been applied through that evolution that I'm so excited to talk about?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, the DNA, and I think I'm probably safe to use sports analogies.
Good, yes, please.
You know, the muscle memory and the activities we learned is really around how to do privacy and security at scale. And, you know, we invented the mobile workplace, and we pivoted to a software company around 2015, where we're doing, it turns out, cybersecurity, large-scale communications. You know, we're in over 215 million automobiles. Like, the places where privacy and security and trust matters, that's the kind of capabilities that we're bringing into this market. And luckily, there's a boatload of that on our horizon with smart cities and healthcare and
it's so interesting because in that evolution, and I've dealt in information security, and now it's much larger than people even realize, and you guys have been the best for decades at doing that, but today it's much more critical. It's actually life or death. It's just not market data.
It's, you know, losing your data is one thing, but, you know, when you're a 2-ton car going, you know, 100 miles an hour, you know, that kind of a cyber breach, it starts to get into the cyber physical domain. You know, we've all seen, you know, power plants or pipelines that have been compromised. So the ability to do cybersecurity and trust in this new connected world that's becoming more connected is a really important skill to have, I think.
And in order to have a skill, you need to practice it. And I think a lot of people don't understand how long BlackBerry has been practicing. So in the early days, whether it was big enterprise, but even more importantly, at the highest security levels of government, you have been the chosen leader, the chosen solution in hardware and software. What are some of the capabilities today that are so important? We talked about the vehicles, but a lot of people aren't aware of, you know, the power plants, of the electrical side of it, but even just traffic control of being able to, you know, if someone turns every light green in even a small geographic area, this could cost many, many lives, more than some of the biggest tragedies that we've had.
Oh yes, the ability to do damage based on just hoping that people behave in a well-ordered way is can be thwarted by, you know, one cyber attack that does, you know, attacks such as you mentioned, and you know we need more than hope to prevent these kind of situations, because the number of cyber criminals is increasing. The use of open source software is increasing, which is, if you infiltrate open source, you might now be in 10,000 different components, and so the ability to attack that goes up. So I think we have a lot of techniques and methods for which we can detect and protect. There's some sort of fundamentals, like design your systems to be partitioned so that if it is compromised, because it will be compromised, that the compromise is contained.
Like a fire.
Yeah, exactly. Have a plan for when it happens, what you're going to do, because it is going to happen, and making your plan then. The first thing you lose is communications, for example. So how are you going to communicate when the communication systems goes down? You should do that. And then there's all, like, we call it least privileges. Like, don't have anything that's executing at a higher level of privilege than than it needs to. So it can minimize the damage it will do. So
That's amazing. Now, along the way, and we see this in social media and social marketing a lot, is that I have a philosophy that's really worked for me, and it's just measure how many mistakes or how many failures you have and try to have less of them.
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Right?
Yeah,
It's like running, and I'll use a sports analogy.
Yeah.
I represented Carl Lewis.
Yeah.
Most people know,
Yes.
he was a little older at least, the fastest man on earth at the time.
Yes.
And when Carl Lewis ran the 100 meters, it looked as if in the last 40 meters that he put on like the juice box, right?
Yeah.
And yet it was really just that he was slowing down less because he was in better shape.
Right.
And so it looked like he was going forward. I see the same thing with technology. It looks like we're going forward, but we're just making less mistakes.
Yeah. No,
And-
I think that's really true.
Right? And so having that experience that you have, being able to mitigate how many mistakes and quantify them, for you, we've all made these mistakes. What are some of the bigger mistakes that have propelled you and protected you through the evolution of BlackBerry?
So I it's probably just to summarize it into one. I think we do. We learn a little bit as we go. So we keep making mistakes, but we make, like you said, make fewer mistakes. So an idea would be like, laptops are not really that secure, but mobile phones were decided to be more partitioned and more secure. So if they were compromised, the damage wouldn't happen. So there's a bunch of sort of low-level methods that you can design in. Most people think that these attacks can't be prevented, so I think you've given up your main advantage at that point. You can prevent a lot of the attacks.
Yes.
And then you only have to react to the ones that overcome your prevention and to be more reactive. But it seems like the whole industry has said, okay, you can't prevent it, so let's just let chaos ensue and then we'll try to contain it. And that you're losing your biggest advantage there in prevention, I think. And the other thing is humans are great.
You're right.
However,
I hope so.
however, when it comes to looking at large amounts of data and looking for anomalies, they're not as good as a very simple ML model. So, using technology in the appropriate way, so you use the humans for the hard problems, use the machine learning for the ones for the things, give computers things they do well, give humans things they can do well. Don't try to muscle through, again, if you get that wrong, it could be much less productive.
And the balance between hardware and software, right? I used to joke around as I had some experience being a CEO of a hardware company. I would today even say in some of my speeches, who's the number one competitor for iPhone's hardware? And people would say Samsung, which is my old manufacturer. And I said, no, I actually think it's iPhone, right? Like, who here has an iPhone 4? And so there is, on the hardware side, a hyper-competitive business atmosphere.
Yes.
And moving to the hardware, what's your future plans on hardware, since it's much more difficult, much more competitive, and very expensive? Is there a hardware plan that is still in place?
Yeah, so our hardware plan is we will work with them all.
Smart. Ubiquitous plan.
So we don't do hardware. And so we use standards where we can. We make sure we run, we don't lock into one particular ecosystem. So our software solutions will run on Windows, they'll run on Mac, they'll run on mobile phones, they'll run on cloud computers. We're highlighting some things at CES today about how our software can be developed in the cloud on top of AWS infrastructure. So it's really quite...
And utilizing a platform, a solution, a software is really implementing power. And I'm a marketing person. So it's very difficult sometimes when you do have the ubiquitous solution that's utilized for everyone. And we know many multinational corporations that have a difficult time branding themselves. And so they've taken on that powered by brand. On a marketing side, is there a plan to build a brand within the context of your powering or securing or some other adjective that best suits what BlackBerry does today?
So in some ways, we have created an ecosystem. We've announced it in its partnership with Amazon BlackBerry Ivy, which is sort of it's an enablement middleware platform for getting data off of generalized IoT devices focused on the first, most cherished one, the software-defined vehicle. And so we're, what I like to say, we're creating a way. The hard thing for software-defined vehicles is how you get software into it. So creating an ecosystem so developers can create content for a vehicle is one of the things we do. So you could say powered by BlackBerry Ivy.
Yeah.
Will
it be branded in cards at all, or will be simply just branded?
So it's interesting because automotive OEMs have their own philosophy on what they mention about what's running under the covers. We're in over 215 million automobiles, but it's not because the OEMs are telling you, oh, by the way, like there's a Ford Mach-E down there with 4 instances of BlackBerry QNX running in it.
Wow.
So it's an integral part of the vehicle, but it's not something that we're generally, it's not our purview to talk about, right? So this is public information.
Right, yeah, it's an interesting business model sometimes when you're limited to explaining or marketing or amplifying the power of the solution so that only those people in the know, and yet you want more people to know so you can implement more. And it becomes quite a challenge sometimes.
You talked about us being in the industry a while. There's nothing better when the company that's using your technology announces it in a press release, then the gates open up and it say powered by this.
Yeah, then you capture that press release and amplify it everywhere.
Exactly.
You talked about humans are great, and one of the interesting things.
I firmly believe that.
Me too. I do too. But humans also live a lot of times in blame, shame, and justification. And so let's take autonomous vehicles, for example. A lot of people tell me I'll never be able to do that because I'm afraid that there'll be a mistake, a breach, something would happen and there'd be an accident. And I was one of the people initially that, was a little afraid of the technology, and then someone explained to me, well, it's once again only about limiting how many mistakes do human beings make.
Right.
So if we're able to take, use arbitrary numbers, 25 million deaths because human beings are far less accurate.
Yeah.
And although there's no security in a human being's brain there's other interferences, but we could drop down to 2.5 million deaths for the mistakes or breaches or whatever that will occur. Right. And this is a hard thing for people to understand because they much rather see human beings making mistakes than the blame, shame, justification of that system caused this death, but meanwhile it saved 22.5 million people. And how do we communicate something that's, I think, not only counterintuitive, but the ego itself a lot of times doesn't allow human nature to be accountable?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and it's something I think about a little bit with autonomous vehicles. I think about vehicles used to be very unsafe, and now vehicles are very safe. How do we do that? So there's lots of safety protocol and engineering there that was put into making cars safe. And I kind of think, okay, why does everyone wear their seatbelt? Like I was an ardent not seatbelt wearer, now I'm an ardent seatbelt wearer.
Just showing our age once again.
How did that happen? There's 2 great theories I've heard there, and I think this applies. The first one is that we indoctrinated the children, and they started harassing the older people that you have to wear your seatbelt. So just sheer, get the, train the next generation to fix this generation. And there was also kind of, standards and regulation that came into place that gave a baseline so this level of safety could come into play. And I think with autonomous vehicles, we're going to see the same thing. In safety, they look at deaths per 100 million miles driven. And so autonomous vehicles haven't even driven 100 million miles yet, and we're already seeing deaths, right? So the idea that we look at the large scale and baseline it against the safety certifications gives me confidence. You're going to get more driver assist functionality coming. Your car may lock up if you're about to go and plug into or crash into some vehicle in front of you that's stopped. It may apply the brakes. Or it may do a lane change block if you're about to do something. So these little incremental safety things will start to happen. And because if you just put someone in an autonomous vehicle today, that's frightening. The other thing we're not good at as our humans is sort of rapid change. So it's going to evolve where the level of autonomy will evolve, and there's going to be people pushing it, and then all of a sudden it's going to be ubiquitous, and we're not going to notice that this has happened. So I think there's a little bit of that, but I wouldn't. We're not good with change, and so that.
Yeah, the only human that's good with change is a wet baby.
Exactly.
They want change immediately. We know that from being older. I will tell you in that evolution when we talk about car safety, I think about to my childhood. I grew up with 6 kids, and my mom and dad would drive with the windows up in a Country Squire station wagon smoking.
Yeah.
Right? And now today everyone's worried about the autonomous vehicle.
I know.
We don't even know how many deaths were caused to children because their parents are just smoking with the windows up.
Yeah, exactly. Now you're killing them slowly versus quickly.
To that measure, we're learning, and what makes it great. And I think it's important. The last question I want to talk to is there has to be a reconciliation of these bright young minds, these technology savvy, as you said, people have grown up. They can't see a screen without touching it and thinking something should happen, even if it's a console TV. They're looking for something to happen. But someone with your experience, situational knowledge, someone who's paid the dummy tax like I have, what prioritized lesson do you help some of the young technology innovators today, over their great talent? What lessons do you try to really empower them with to utilize a technology like BlackBerry to its greatest potential?
I think there's lots of wisdom that they're yet to achieve, wisdom not yet attained, and I find with the youth, like sometimes they'll have such an impressive one-dimensional capability that I'm jealous of.
Me too.
But then I realize, okay, there's 3 or 4 naivety walls that they haven't yet crashed into. So I try to ask questions about how would you, just sort of the quiet older, how would you envision this going, or what would success look like? What's your objective here? I'm a really big believer in, out of the ball thinking, or
me too.
So it's sort of like. Okay, you think this is good, you can make it 10% better, but could you make it 1,000 times better? Or just kind of, most of the limitations of the human is sort of self-perceived restrictions. So, say if you look in the mirror and say, you can do this, your chance of doing it goes up. That's not all you need to do, but you need to believe in yourself. And so giving them the tips for the things they're about to turn it into a learning experience, not fall flat on your face. They can stumble, but then continue to grow and be these amazing next generation people that now have a little bit more wisdom like that has been applied.
Well, I'll tell you this, Charles Eagan, the CTO of BlackBerry, I miss the hardware side, the greatest devices ever created for PIM applications, especially the personal information management. Nobody reached to me a higher level of utilization than BlackBerry, but as someone who has a historical perspective of technology, I'm more excited knowing that BlackBerry is behind securing a lot of the solutions today to mitigate risk and provide us an exceptional future so that these great innovations can not only be utilized but can protect us and promote us. And it takes companies and leadership. And the company's BlackBerry, and the leadership is Charles Eagan. He's the CTO of BlackBerry. You may not always see what they're doing, but I promise you, all of us, we are blessed to have BlackBerry. They're making our lives safer and better. Thank you for joining me, Charles. I appreciate it.
It's my great pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
Amazing interview. This is David Meltzer here at CES with the CTO of BlackBerry, Charles Eagan. This is David Meltzer from Entrepreneurs, The Playbook.